She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. In a fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from my hiding.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time, and today is going to be a long one because today we are talking about a man named Samuel Rapidly Bateman, who is the current and self-proclaimed leader and prophet of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, FLDS for short, and this FLDS cult functions out of a place called Colorado City, Arizona, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to refer to this area as the Short Creek community, which includes not only Colorado City, Arizona, but its sister city of Hildale, Utah. Together, Colorado City and Hildale form a small, historically polygamous community on the Arizona-Utah border, and at least half of Short Creek's 8,000 residents are descendants of the founders of Short Creek, and that would be Joseph Smith Jessup and John Barlow. So Samuel Bateman is a 46-year-old man, if you can call him a man. I wouldn't call him a man, but if you want to call him a man, we'll call him a man. Anyway, Samuel Bateman is a 46-year-old man who was once a follower of Warren Jeffs, the previous prophet of Short Creek and the FLDS Church, who is now serving a life sentence in prison for his own crimes against women and children. And now his follower and self-proclaimed current prophet Samuel Bateman is facing his own set of charges against young girls, forcing him to tear himself away from his reportedly 20 or so wives, at least 10 of which are under the age of 18, the youngest being 9 years old. Yes, you heard me right. This guy is a scumbag, and we're going to talk about him. But first, before we dive in and start feeling bad, let's talk about something that will make us feel good. Care of, who's the sponsor of today's video. I know everyone talks about being healthier and taking better care of themselves in the new year, and I'm no exception. I have a lot going on. I'm very busy, and the last person that I take care of is myself, even though I understand logically that I can only go so long doing that. So instead of waiting for the new year, I actually made some changes starting in November, and those changes meant things like being more active, walking every single day, going to the gym more, being more conscious about what I'm putting in my body and what my body needs, but what it may not be getting because I haven't been loving myself enough, taking care of myself enough. And I know so many of you who are listening to this right now can relate to that, and you feel what I'm saying. So I actually started using Care of a few months ago, and I am really honestly satisfied with the whole process. Care of is a subscription service that ships high-quality, personalized vitamins, powders, and supplements to your door every single month. It is so hard to tune out all the noise out there and all the people telling you what you should be doing and what vitamins you should be taking, because everyone's different and everyone has their own path to personal health. But it does get really exhausting trying to figure out what your personal path is, and Care of really helps with that. You start off by taking a quick but in-depth quiz about your lifestyle, your health goals, and then you get a personalized doctor-backed recommendation, which takes the guesswork and confusion out of what supplements are best suited for you. I love that the ingredients Care of uses are really high quality, thoughtfully sourced, and backed by research, so I don't have to feel nervous or anxious about what I'm putting in my body. like I do when I buy vitamins off of Amazon, and I'm reading all of these reviews about these supplements and these vitamins on Amazon, and some people are like, this is the greatest vitamin ever, and some people are like, don't take this, it's poison, and it's just so much. So thankfully, now that I found Care Of, I will never have to purchase sketchy vitamins off of Amazon again. And each Care Of shipment comes with a customized pamphlet that shows you what you've received, why it was recommended to you for your specific health goals, and Care Of makes it so easy and convenient to not only remember to take your vitamins every day because they come divided in individual daily packs, but if you're traveling or on the go, you just have to throw a pack or 2 or 3 in your purse or your luggage, and that saves you the time of sorting and separating everything yourself, which personally I think makes it more likely that you'll actually bring your vitamins with you when you're on the go or on vacation. I just went to Great Wolf Lodge with my family this past weekend for Bella's birthday, and I normally would just have been like, hey, we're not taking vitamins this weekend because it's too much and I don't really have the time. And once again, I always take care of myself last. So having these really convenient, already pre-portioned packets was so easy. I just grabbed 3 for the days I was going to be gone, threw them in my little fanny pack, and I was done. So, for instance, my vitamin pack comes with 5 capsules. Magnesium for muscle and bone health, iron because I am anemic and I don't eat a lot of red meat, collagen for my joint health because I do take a dance class twice a week, and my knees are screaming in a way that 20-year-old me would never understand, and something called astaxanthin for skin and eye health. I really am concerned about my eye health because I'm on the computer a lot, and it's kind of important to keep my eyes healthy. I also got some electrolyte powders to improve my hydration, which was another thing I've been focusing on these past few months. And I got a focus blend because I've been feeling really fuzzy-headed, not super motivated for a while, especially with the winter and the lack of sun, and I wanted to do something about it. I figured, there was something lacking in my body. Honestly, I've been so happy with everything that Care Of has sent me, and it's something I can do every day, something small that only takes a few minutes where I'm taking care of myself and putting myself first. So if you also want to give yourself a little love, you can check Care Of out for yourself. All you have to do is go to takecareof.com and use code stephanieharlowe50 for 50% off your first Care Of order, which is a really great deal because this gives you the opportunity to check Care Of out and make sure it works for you for a very discounted price. Or you can just click on the link in the description box below. Once again, use code stephanieharlowe50 and get 50% off your first Care Of order. Thank you so much to Care Of for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Everyone say hi to Rosie. She's my emotional support animal for this video because I'm gonna need it, and you are too. So give her a quick look. Hi, Rosie, you're a good girl. You're a good girl. You're going to make us feel better. You're going to make us feel better when we have to talk about this horrible, mean man. Oh. So let me lay out the basics of this case, and then I'll go into more detail. It seems like this all started this past summer on August 28th, 2022, when Samuel Bateman was pulled over near Flagstaff, Arizona, after a patrol officer noticed some small fingers and small hands sticking out of a wooden horse trailer being pulled by a truck. Authorities reported that inside this unventilated trailer, they found 3 girls aged 11 to 14 who were using a bucket for a toilet.
And does everyone have water? Anyone needing water or anything? You guys? Okay, we'll do that as soon as our investigation is done here, okay? Why children are being transported in a vehicle, we're getting calls about hands sticking out of a vehicle, out of the trailer. So that is why we're contacting you guys, because it is unsafe for children to be riding in a trailer. They're not properly seat belted, and we need to do an investigation and figure out what's going on, okay? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, isn't that legal in Arizona?
No, ma'am.
Will it go on my record? Will it harm my record?
Right now, we're just investigating. Okay, you're not being charged with anything at the moment. You're not free to go because we are conducting an investigation.
What about him?
At this point, he's detained right now. I don't know.
That really makes me mad.
Okay, I understand that, but like he said, once we do our investigation, we can figure this out. But we just need you guys to give us your names and stuff.
You have to let him go.
No, ma'am.
No.
You're not going to decide the outcome of this. We will decide, and we'll let you know how everything's going to happen here, okay? Sound okay?
Bateman was then taken into custody, arrested, booked into the Coconino County Jail, and charged with 3 counts of child endangerment. But he was released from state custody when one of his followers and fellow Short Creek resident, Torrance Bistline, posted his $150,000 bail using a business check from something called Velociraptor. And no, that's not a dinosaur. It's a company that sells and rents a machine that was invented by Bistline. According to Velociraptor.com, the Velociraptor is a self-propelled wrapping cable machine for wind and solar farms. Now, I'll touch a little bit more on the Bistline family later on, but just understand that 1, the Bistlines are huge followers of Samuel Bateman. 2, Torrance Bistline is a big-time loyal supporter. And 3, Naomi Bistline is one of Samuel Bateman's wives. So, while Samuel Bateman was in the Coconino County Jail, he made some moves, and he managed to get instructions to his followers that they should begin deleting electronic evidence off their cellular devices, specifically communications with an application called Signal. So Signal is an end-to-end encrypted instant message and SMS app where users can send direct or group messages, photos, and voice messages across multiple devices. But the key advantage that the Signal app offers over other similar apps is their focus on security and privacy. When 2 or more Signal users start a conversation, they can use end-to-end encryption, which means no one outside of that conversation can read it. Not even the people who work for Signal, not law enforcement, not the government, which is why many activists have been encouraged to use the application. But it also gets misused by people like Samuel Bateman and his followers for nefarious reasons. So after returning to his followers, getting bailed out at the start of September 2022, Samuel Bateman allegedly continued to get rid of evidence and allegedly started securing passports for some of his wives, who, remember, are all very young women and very young girls. Many of these young women and young girls are minors. And then, in the early morning hours of September 13th, 2022, dozens of armed FBI agents descended upon Colorado City, Arizona, and raided 2 homes that were affiliated with Samuel Bateman and the business address for the Velociraptor Company, also affiliated with Samuel Bateman. One of the raided homes was where Samuel Bateman himself lived with his wives, and another nearby home that was raided, that was where Bateman's followers lived. Some of Bateman's followers lived. Now, at that time, Bateman was taken back into custody, arrested again, and Arizona Child Protective Services removed 9 underage girls from Short Creek. Those 9 girls were interviewed and placed into group homes pending dependency proceedings. Basically, dependency proceedings are going to determine whether these girls' parents or guardians were fit to take care of them. And the fact that these girls were married off to Samuel Bateman kind of tells me everything I need to know. Do we even really need dependency proceedings at this point? I don't think so. But then, the Sunday after Thanksgiving, this past November, 8 of those 9 girls vanished from the homes they'd been placed in, and electronic devices that they had left behind suggested that these girls were still in contact with a handful of Samuel Bateman's adult wives, specifically 3 of them, and they were in communication with these 3 women using the Signal app. Now, these women, Naomi Bistline, Danae Barlow, and Moretta Rose Johnson, were arrested and charged with obstructing a federal prosecution and kidnapping. So, as always, to understand what happened at the end, we have to go back to the beginning. And I guess the beginning of this case would technically be December 23rd, 1805, when a man named Joseph Smith Jr. was born in Vermont. Now, I want to be really clear before diving into this. I have nothing against the LDS Church or Mormons in general. To be completely honest, I don't even really have a problem with polygamy. If you're a consenting adult, do it up. I don't care what you do. Big Love was one of my favorite shows back in the day. I still turn Sister Wives on sometimes, specifically to make myself feel better about not being a sister wife. But whatever makes you happy, whatever floats your boat. If you're old enough to know what you want and what you like and you aren't hurting anyone, I do not care what you do in your bedroom. And honestly, sometimes I wish I had a sister wife. I feel like life would be so much easier and the burden would be off. But then I remember how possessive I am. And I'm like, maybe I'll just hire a nanny or something for extra help, Probably don't need a sister wife. But anyways, I'm very accepting of all lifestyles, cultures, religions. I do not have any judgment here. So if you're a Mormon or part of the LDS Church, please do not be offended or hurt by anything said in this video. It is not directed at you at all. However, if you're part of the FLDS Church, the splinter group who still practice polygamy and who make it a practice to turn literal children into wives that they then marry off to old, lecherous men, please do be offended. Feel the shame and reevaluate your life choices. Feel free to feel offended in any way, shape, or form that I can possibly make you feel offended, because I cannot support that. I just can't. And in order to have a handle on how this splinter group came to rise up from the LDS Church, we do have to go back and re-examine the history of Mormonism quickly. Keep in mind, this is a very short, condensed, dumbed down version of the history of Mormonism. There's no possible way I can get everything in, including all the intricacies of how a culture and how a religion form in a 5-minute breakdown. So, just keep that in mind. I am well aware of the history of Mormonism. You'll find out that I live very close to where Mormonism was born, so we do learn a lot about that here in upstate New York. But I can't possibly get everything in. It is a very interesting story, though. If you want to explore it more, I'll have some resources for you in the description box. So Joseph Smith Jr. was the founder of Mormonism and the first leader of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, known from here on out as the LDS Church, which currently is headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah, and which has more than 16 million members worldwide. Smith's father was a farmer in Sharon, Vermont, but a series of crop failures caused the Smith family to move to Palmyra, New York, which is where Joseph Smith Jr. began having visions. Now, I have gone into more details about the roots of the LDS Church in other videos, but basically Palmyra is pretty close to where I live, and it's part of an area that was known as the Burned Over District, which refers to the western and central regions of New York State, where so many new religious movements sprung up that it is said the spiritual fervor set the area on fire. For instance, Joseph Smith claimed it was here that he received his first vision from God at the age of 14. And that message that he received were basically instructions to not join any Christian denominational churches because they were all misguided and wrong. And I mean the Branch Davidians, Seventh-day Adventism, spiritualism, all of these things sprang up in the burned over district of New York. Super cool history. I actually have a video about spiritualism where I talk about the burned over district. I'll link it in the description box. So the story goes, when Smith was 17, an angel named Moroni appeared to him and revealed to Joseph Smith that he had been chosen to translate the Book of Mormon, a sacred text written around the 14th century, which also happened to be named after Moroni's father, Mormon. Moroni told Smith that he could find the text inscribed on golden plates in Palmyra, and allegedly Smith did in fact find these plates buried in a stone box conveniently near his family farm. Smith then translated the plates into the Book of Mormon, which was published in March of 1830. And by April of 1830, Joseph Smith began gathering followers and organizing them into settlements that he referred to as cities of Zion, basically safe places they could go to worship and pray together while they waited for the calamities of the end times. The general population did not like Smith and his followers. And there's, depending on who you talk to, There's different reasons for that, but basically everywhere that Smith and his followers settled, they were chased out, especially as their numbers grew and they maybe started to gain some money, some political power, etc. Smith and his followers eventually ended up in Missouri, but when his group was once again threatened with expulsion, he fought back, which caused the governor of Missouri to order all Mormons driven out of the state or exterminated, which led to Joseph Smith being a highly wanted man. But this didn't stop him from building his largest and most successful settlement in the isolated and nearly abandoned town of Commerce, Illinois, on the banks of the Mississippi River. Although the settlement grew and flourished into a rather large city, Joseph Smith himself was jailed in Carthage, Illinois in February of 1844. He was charged with treason, and 4 months later, he was murdered in jail by an angry anti-Mormon mob. So you can see right from the start, being jailed, being attacked would be viewed by Mormons as religious persecution, which, I mean, at that time, I suppose it was. But when you look in the context of like 2022 and the FLDS church, is it really religious persecution? I don't think so. So when you see high-profile figures like Warren Jeffs and now Samuel Bateman are put behind bars, and we sometimes wonder why this doesn't wake their followers up to the fact that they're bad guys, this may be a very simplified, partial answer to that question, although in my opinion, it doesn't excuse any FLDS members from continuing on doing what they're doing to children. And Joseph Smith also answers the question of why members of the LDS Church began practicing polygamy or plural marriage to begin with. Years before he published the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith's brother Alvin died at the age of 25, and it was understandably impactful and tough for Joseph. So, Joseph Smith claimed that in 1836, his brother Alvin appeared to him in a vision, and based on this vision, Joseph Smith developed the Mormon teaching that families who underwent religious rites called sealings could be together forever in heaven. So the more wives and children you have, the bigger your family in heaven, the more respected you are on earth, and, the better chance of, you getting into heaven. Now, according to Joseph Smith, it was the important job of Mormon men to save the people they loved, to make sure that they were able to get to heaven. And so it only made sense that a truly righteous man could save multiple people he loved, multiple wives, and multiple children that all of these multiple wives bore for him. And all of them are going to be together in heaven forever. According to Joseph Smith, plural marriage was practiced by prophets from the Old Testament, like Abraham, and so the larger your family in the afterlife, the better. And so this teaching was established as doctrine in 1843, and the LDS Church has acknowledged that Joseph Smith himself had as many as 40 wives, some of them as young as 14 years old. And maybe this was also a big reason why the average citizen didn't really want Mormons hanging around their towns and cities, and they started chasing them off because they were not comfortable with this, given the fact that most people were Christian at this time in America and very puritanical. And also, a lot of the people didn't like how insular the Mormons were. They lived together, they voted together, they combined their political and financial power. And the people who were already living in these areas didn't like that these outsiders came in and started calling the shots and started running things. So like I said, multiple reasons why people at that time weren't a big fan of the Mormons. Now, Joseph Smith eventually taught Mormon men to be crafty. His word, not my word, crafty in their practice of plural marriage. Basically, keep it on the down low. Just do it, but don't be obvious about doing it. But when he died and the next leader, Brigham Young, took over, LDS leaders announced publicly that plural marriage was an official practice of the Mormon Church in 1852. And, you could just be upfront with it, like be proud, be loud. But people still didn't like it. And so Brigham Young led a large group of Mormons out of Illinois in search of religious freedom. And on July 24th, 1847, Young and 148 28 others crossed into the Great Salt Lake Valley. Brigham Young had headed west because that area was still fairly unsettled and not yet in the strong grasp of the United States government. It was literally the wild, wild west. And there, Brigham Young founded Salt Lake City, and he went on to serve as the first governor of the Utah Territory. Now, the community of Short Creek is still told to this day that Brigham Young once visited their area and announced, quote, "This will someday be the head and not the tail of the church," end quote. For more than half a century, plural marriage was practiced by some, but not all members of the LDS Church, mostly the ones living in Utah. But starting in 1862, the United States government, who had been really not happy about this to begin with, they began passing laws banning the practice of plural marriage. After the Supreme Court found that anti-polygamy laws were constitutional in 1879, federal law enforcement began to enforce these laws and persecute or prosecute polygamous couples, which is how out-of-the-way and insular communities like Short Creek began to spring up. So if you too were a fan of Big Love, imagine the place where Roman, the prophet, lived. And remember, Bill was, like, if you don't watch Big Love, you're not going to understand this at all. But Bill was the son-in-law of Roman because one of Bill's wives, the coolest one, she was Roman's daughter. So they'd sometimes have to go back to this compound, this Short Creek area. They didn't call it, I think they called it Juniper Creek actually, but they'd have to go back to this Juniper Creek, Short Creek area. And it was just so backwards and so out of the way. And the women are wearing these long, like, skirts and high neck tops, and their hair's long and braided, and there's no young men around, right? Because all the young men get chased out. And we're going to talk about that because that is actually very accurate. That's exactly what Warren Jeffs did to the young men of Short Creek because he didn't want young men there being competition for the young women that he was going to marry off to FLDS church elders, old men. In 1890, the current president, current at the time of 1890, not the current president today, but the current president in 1890 of the LDS Church, Wilford Woodruff, announced that he was going to submit to the laws enacted by Congress, and he would use his influence to convince members of his church to do the same. So basically, like, hey, the LDS Church no longer practices plural marriage. We are denouncing it. It is not something that is any more a part of our doctrine. However, there was a certain group, a certain amount of people who believed that the anti-polygamy laws were unjust, unconstitutional. And they also believed that their church president was simply caving to political pressure. I mean, which he was, right? That's absolutely what he was doing. So this group, some members broke away and formed their own offshoot groups where they could continue to practice plural marriage. One of these breakaway groups was led by a man named John Barlow, and he brought his followers away from Salt Lake City and settled in the isolated area on the Arizona Strip that would become known as Short Creek. The people who live in the Short Creek area continue to practice plural marriage to this day, and they're known as FLDS, the fundamentalist branch of the LDS Church, since the current and modern LDS Church does not condone or practice polygamy any longer. So this group was like, we want to still have plural marriage and marry children, so we're going to go over here in this isolated area in the desert where no one can bother us. For a long time, the FLDS branch had almost complete control over politics and business in Short Creek. That's actually just starting to change now within the last few years when more secular people are sort of like speaking up and taking back control. But for a long time, the residents of this polygamous community kept to itself and stayed off the radar until 2002, when a man named Warren Jeffs became the prophet, and he did a lot of stupid shit, and he drew a lot of attention to himself. And if you've seen the Netflix series Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, you already know. Warren Jeffs took control of the 12,000 members of the FLDS Church in Short Creek in September of 2002 after the death of his father, Rulon Jeffs, who died when he was 92 years old. Rulon Jeffs terrorized people for a long-ass time. Now, at that time, when Rulon Jeffs died and his son Warren Jeffs took over, they had members of the FLDS Church living not only at Short Creek, but also at a place called Bountiful, British Columbia. So it's an FLDS settlement in Canada. And in November of 2003, the FLDS Church under Warren Jeffs added a compound to their repertoire in El Dorado, Texas. When Warren Jeffs took over the FLDS Church, things went from bad to worse. He basically shut them off even further from the outside world. So children were no longer allowed to go to public school, which made it impossible for the FLDS kids to learn anything outside of the extremely narrow worldview that they were taught at home. For instance, FLDS children are taught that the world was created roughly 7,000 years ago, not over 4 billion years ago, and church prophet Leroy Johnson claimed that he'd had a prophecy in 1968 that no human would ever land on the moon. Therefore, many FLDS children do not believe that anyone ever has. Now, did you hear what I said? Leroy Johnson was a prophet before the Jeffs family took over. Now, if you look back to what I said earlier, I said that 3 of Samuel Bateman's wives were arrested for helping him, kidnap these underage children, who were also his wives, these underage children. And one of the wives' names was Moretta Rose Johnson. Yes, she is a descendant from the prophet Leroy Johnson. And so is her father, Moroni Johnson, who we will talk about also very soon. So under Warren Jeffs, the people, the followers that he had, were told they could have no internet, no television. Literal walls were put up around houses, and something called God Squads began patrolling the streets. If magazines like Sports Illustrated or Car and Driver were found in the boys' rooms, the boys would be punished. And books that had talking animals in them were banned because Warren Jeffs said that they taught lies, because I guess he didn't want children to grow up thinking that animals can talk, but he has no problem with children growing up thinking that the world was created 7,000 years ago. The color red was completely banned as well, because apparently when Jesus Christ returns to the world, he'll be wearing red. So you can't wear red, which is funny because Samuel Bateman, who, as we will find, took over for Warren Jeffs, Samuel Bateman, the man we're here to talk about today, he seemed to really enjoy the color red, and he made all of his wives, even the children, wear red lingerie. So I don't know. They're going to have to get on the same page about what's important, what's not important, what you can do and what you can't do. It's very complicated, very confusing doctrine here. Under Warren Jeffs, the Short Creek community saw scores of young men and boys being cast out of the community, shunned so that the older men and church leaders would not have to compete with the youth in order to have their pick of the ladies, the brides, the underage girls. Now, these boys who were cast out of these communities are known as the Lost Boys. During his leadership, Warren Jeffs is believed to have had 78 wives at the same time, and only 54 of these wives were over the age of 17. 18 of his wives had been previously married to his father, Rulon, before he died. People called Rulon Jeffs Uncle Rulon. Isn't that cute? Warren Jeffs lived with his wives in a 29,000 square foot, 45-bedroom mansion in Hilldale, Utah, and he didn't really try to hide his lifestyle or his dirty deeds. In June of 2005, Warren Jeffs was indicted on charges of sexual misconduct with a minor and conspiracy to commit sexual misconduct with a minor after being accused of arranging a marriage between a teenage girl and an older man. And I'm sure that wasn't the first time he did that. By May of 2006, Jeffs was put on the FBI's 10 most wanted list after he bailed out of prison and ran the year before, and he was eventually arrested during a traffic stop outside of Las Vegas on August 28, 2006. August 28, 2006. Now, a lot of the FLDS people believe that Samuel Bateman's arrest on August 28, 2022 is like an organized attack on the FLDS church and sending them a message like, we arrested one of your prophets on August 28th and we're arresting another one of your prophets on August 28th. And it very well could be, and it very well should be, right? There should be an attack and a plan to dismantle the FLDS church. If it can even be called a church at this point, I think it's most likely, a cult, the FLDS cult. So Warren Jeffs would be convicted by a jury in St. George, Utah, but due to problems with jury instructions, that conviction would be overturned in 2010, but it didn't matter because Jeffs would not see the outside of a prison. Once he was convicted of child sexual assault charges in a Texas court after a 2008 raid of his El Dorado compound, and this compound was called the Yearning for Zion Ranch. And listen, a bunch of children were removed from this ranch. There was proof that sexual abuse of minors was happening, and Texas, they don't mess around with that stuff, so they gave Jeffs a life sentence. Now, several people testified against Warren Jeffs, including one of his followers, Ezra Draper, who claimed that FLDS men began taking brides younger and younger after Jeffs took over in 2002. Prosecutors played a tape of what they claimed was Warren Jeffs raping one of his victims when she was just 12 years old. This child was taken as one of his wives, and this consummation ceremony was not only recorded, but some of Jeffs' other wives watched. And they also showed DNA evidence that Warren Jeffs was the father of a child born to a girl who was just 15 years old. Now, it's terrifying to think all this evidence that they had in order to prove the horrible things that happened to these children. What about all the other terrible things that happened that there is no evidence of? I'm sure there's a lot. With someone like Warren Jeffs, I'm sure what we know of what he did is just the tip of the iceberg. And that's the same with Samuel Bateman, in my humble opinion. And that brings us to the man, Samuel Bateman, who grew up in Short Creek during the rule of Warren Jeffs, the man who brought us here today. Warren Jeffs is currently serving a life sentence in prison, and he's been behind bars since 2006, but even then, he was still considered to be the prophet of the FLDS church in Short Creek because they believe in the one-man rule. They don't believe in the one-woman rule, right? They want as many of those as they can get, but they believe in the one-man rule. And basically, the one-man rule means that the prophet has supreme authority over the faithful, and he's the only one who can determine whether they get to heaven. So there can only be one prophet at once, and until he dies, he's the prophet. That basically meant that from 2006 on, they had no guidance in Short Creek. There were no new marriages in Short Creek because Warren Jeffs was the only person who was able to officiate new marriages, sealings. And then in 2010, Jeffs sent his followers a message saying that not only could none of them get married anymore, but they should all be practicing abstinence even within their marriages because his church was dirty and this would be the first step in cleansing his church. And they listened to him. I mean, I'm sure there's some that didn't listen to him, but for the most part, his loyal followers, and there's many, they kept following his instructions, even though he was behind bars. And also from prison, Warren Jeffs decreed that only men of a royal bloodline would be able to reproduce. They would be called the seed bearers, and there was about 15 of these men in Short Creek, and they were the only ones who would be allowed to procreate with women who were hand-chosen by Jeffs after these women applied to be selected. Like, let's be honest, these women probably did not apply to be selected. So basically what Warren Jeffs is saying is you all can't have sex within your marriages, but I'm going to pick 15 random men who are the seed bearers. They're the only ones who can impregnate women, and they can impregnate your wives too, because many of these wives that were chosen by Warren Jeffs were already married. According to Rolling Stone magazine, quote, husbands are made to watch these breeding sessions in which seed bearers wear a hood and a sheet is placed between the man and woman to keep their identities secret. Any children born from these unions are put into hiding, likely at the FLDS network of secret compounds scattered through the West. They then become property of the church with no knowledge of the identity of their parents, end quote. Why? Why would that happen? Why would you get women pregnant, have them bear children, and then take those children away into hiding? What are you doing with the children? Where are the children? All great questions. But Warren Jeffs was making all of these things happen and pulling all of these strings behind the scenes and from behind bars, even making end-of-the-world prophecies. His hold on his followers was strong. But then, after 2010, Warren Jeffs began communicating with the outside a bit less, and a sort of emptiness happened. A power vacuum developed, which Samuel Bateman was happy to fill because he was pretty much a broke loser who was successful in nothing, and he needed to have a bunch of followers to make him feel good about himself and to make him feel like he had, something to offer the world. But before we talk about him, I want to direct you back to the way things had been in Short Creek for decades, which isn't that every single FLDS man gets multiple wives. It's usually just the older men, the elders, the ones who are at the top of the power structure, which is why there's a high incidence of a rare genetic disorder there in Short Creek. The twin border communities of Hilldale, Utah, and Colorado City, Arizona, have the world's highest known prevalence of fumarase deficiency, an extremely rare genetic disease that causes severe intellectual disability, unusual facial features, brain malformations, and epileptic seizures. And the high rate of this particular genetic anomaly is attributed to generations of cousins and related marriages within the community. Inbreeding, because remember, something like 75 to 80% of the people from this area are the blood relatives of just two men, the founders of Short Creek, John Barlow and Joseph Smith Jessup. And I want to bring you back to that Barlow name because we've already traced two of Samuel Bateman's wives to prominent FLDS families. We've traced Naomi Bisline to the Bisline family, who were huge followers of Warren Jeffs, whose ancestors have been in Short Creek since the get-go. And we've traced his other wife, Moretta Johnson, to one of the previous prophets of Short Creek in the FLDS church. And now we have his other wife, who was arrested, Donna Barlow, who's literally descendant from one of the founders of Short Creek. Okay, let's talk about Samuel Bateman. He was born and raised in Colorado City, Arizona, and his father, Deloy Bateman, taught science in the Colorado City Unified School District, the same public school district that Samuel would attend. Now, remember that guy I spoke about a little while ago, the prophet Leroy Johnson, who said no man would ever land on the moon? Well, that was Deloy Bateman's grandfather, making Johnson Samuel Bateman's great-grandfather, making Samuel Bateman definitely related to his wife, Moretta Johnson. So I imagine that it was tough for Samuel's father, Deloy, to be a science teacher when it would have been considered controversial for him to talk about things like, the actual age of the planet, or the fact that people actually did land on the moon. So Deloy Bateman decided to try and make a change in the lives of FLDS children where he could, saying, quote, "I figure this room is the only place in the world where they really have a chance. They need to learn as much as they can here. This is usually the end of their education," end quote. Basically, he's saying FLDS children, especially the girls, they do not go on to college. They don't go on to further education. And for a while, Deloy was able to do this without bringing too much negative attention to himself. He was even considered important enough by church elders to be assigned 2 wives. And by 2001, he was the father of 17 children. One of those children was Samuel Bateman, who apparently didn't get enough attention or critical thinking from his father. But anyways, when Leroy Johnson died, Warren Jeffs' father, Rulon Jeffs, took over. So Leroy Johnson is related to Moretta Rose Johnson, one of Samuel Bateman's wives. Leroy Johnson was the prophet. When he died, Warren Jeffs' father, Uncle Rulon Jeffs, took over. So the Johnson reign ended and the Jeffs reign started. And when the Jeffs reign started, Bateman's father, Deloy, didn't like the way things were going, especially when Rulon, Uncle Rulon, because just being an old pervert pretending to be a prophet isn't creepy enough. We gotta call him Uncle Rulon. But anyways, when Rulon got into his 90s, he was still kicking. He began handing a bunch of power over to his unruly and unstable son, Warren. And Warren was actually given a ton of responsibility over the public school system in Short Creek. In fact, many students at that time have now come out and accused him of sexual crimes, molestation, rape, things like that. So this caused Deloy Bateman to finally leave Short Creek and the FLDS church in 1996 as he saw teen girl after teen girl drop out and leave high school to become brides. In a 2001 interview with the Denver Post, Deloy said, quote, "When Warren hit, we hardly had any high school girls left. One day they'd be in the classroom, and the next day they'd have disappeared. It didn't take long before I'd see them walking around pregnant," end quote. Once Deloy was no longer FLDS, he could not justify plural marriage, allegedly according to him, and he basically told his junior wife, it was over, like they weren't married anymore, which is kind of messed up, but whatever. He was like, get out. When I say junior wife, by the way, I don't mean underage. I just mean his second wife. So the first wife would be considered the senior wife. She has precedence. And then the junior wife is the second wife. And then all wives after that are considered even junior to the junior wife. But basically, I don't know if Samuel Bateman's second wife was underage. I have no proof that she was. She was just his junior wife. So he was like, it's done. You go home, get out of here. But then the Jeffs family interfered, and they basically tried to assign his senior wife, his actual legal wife, his first wife, to another husband. And then Warren Jeffs started telling his followers that if they were true believers, they wouldn't go to the public school that Deloy was teaching at. And this basically started a Short Creek civil war. You had the people who were disenchanted with what the FLDS church had become, what the community had become, and then you had the devout followers who followed Rulon and Warren Jeffs without question, turning on people like Deloy who felt something good and pure had been corrupted and perverted. Now, I'm not saying that anything the FLDS church has done was good or pure. I'm just saying that clearly many of them thought they were, and there were and are FLDS members who don't practice plural marriage and who aren't working on their collection of child brides, okay? So these people, if they didn't go along with the very extreme turn that Short Creek was taking, they would be cast out of the community, kicked out of their homes that they lived in all of their lives, homes that possibly several generations of their families had lived in. And if they were business owners and they didn't go along with the changes and things that were happening under the leadership of the Jeffs family, their businesses would be boycotted and they'd eventually just have to close up and leave because most of the people living in Short Creek for a long, long time were simply FLDS members. Like I said, that's just starting to change. Now, homes and businesses in Short Creek had once been private property, but that was before the Jeffs took over. When Rulon Jeffs and Warren Jeffs took over, they made sure that everyone signed everything over to the church trust. For religious reasons, the early settlers of Short Creek had decided to hold all of their land in common and created something called the United Effort Plan Trust to basically keep, manage, and distribute property to its members. In 2018, the UEP Trust held 90% of all housing in Short Creek. In 1998, that trust was revised to make the FLDS leader its sole director. That would have been Rulon Jeffs. And when Warren Jeffs became prophet in 2002, he assumed total control over that trust, which meant total control over his followers, basically, because he could just say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like what you're saying. I don't like that you don't want to marry a 9-year-old, so you no longer live in your house. Get out. And also your wives are not your property either. And if you have a business, we're going to shut it down. In 1996, when Deloy Bateman left the church, his 3 older children, aged 19, 20, and 23, were told that he was the son of the devil, and they were not allowed to speak to him even though they lived in the same town. Now, Samuel Bateman was one of these older children who was taught that since his father no longer towed the party line, he was a bad man and needed to be cut off, and Samuel would go on to be a fervent and loyal follower of Warren Jeffs, even going to court every day when Jeffs went on trial for rape allegations in 2006. But according to some who grew up with Samuel, he wasn't always so bad. I don't know about that. I guess we'll have to consider the source, which is Lamont Barlow, who was Bateman's cousin on his mother's side. So Lamont Barlow is his cousin on his mother's side. I wonder if Samuel Bateman's mother was a Barlow, which means that he's married to his cousin, right? Or like his second cousin, or like maybe his niece. I don't know. You try to build a family tree of an FLDS family. You try that out, okay? That tree is going to be growing into its own self. So Lamont Barlow was Samuel Bateman's cousin on his mother's side, and he remembered Samuel as an outgoing kid with a wild streak who once rode his bike off a diving board and into a swimming pool. I don't think that's too wild, personally. I've done that before, and I'm certainly not someone you would describe as wild. Maybe that's what's considered like Mormon wild, like, he drove his bike off the diving board into a swimming pool. He's wild. He's a bad boy. He's like the Hell's Angels of Short Creek is like Samuel Bateman driving his bike into the swimming pool. Whatever. Anyways, Lamont Barlow, Samuel Bateman's cousin, he remembered that as Samuel reached his late teens and moved into his early 20s in the 1990s, he became more religious and devout. At one point, Bateman told his cousin, Lamont, that he'd gone to FLDS church elders to repent after a romantic relationship, and it was around then that Samuel Bateman devoted his entire life to the church. But in January of 1999, something happened which I guess changed, a lot of people's lives, honestly, changed Samuel's life. It changed a lot of the people who he was with that day's lives. And a lot of people believe that it also changed Samuel Bateman's personality and dictated his future path. So it was January 6th, 1999, when a group of young people from Short Creek were headed to another polygamous community in northern Canada. I'm sure it was Bountiful, British Columbia. So 4 men in their late teens and early 20s, including Samuel Bateman, guided 2 teenage girls into a black Suburban. These 2 girls were 14-year-old Victoria Cook and 15-year-old Jamie Cook, Victoria's older sister. Apparently, the Cook sisters had been acting out, sneaking out of their houses at night to meet with boys, which is very forbidden. Okay, you can't meet with boys. You have to save yourself for your 75-year-old husband that we're going to marry you off to, like now, because they're 14 and 15. They're ready. So no one wanted the Cook sisters sneaking out to meet with boys. And the then prophet, Rulon Jeffs, had a meeting with the girls' family, and it was his decision to send Victoria and Jamie to Winston Blackmore, the polygamous leader of Bountiful, British Columbia in Canada. And last time I checked, good old Winston has 150 children and 27 wives, some of who were underage at the time of their marriage. Winston Blackmore's father was actually the one who started Bountiful, and Winston's uncle is John Horne Blackmore, who was Canada's former Social Credit Party leader. Now, John Blackmore himself was excommunicated by the LDS Church in 1947 because he was teaching and advocating for plural marriage. It also seems that Blackmore was pretty racist and anti-Semitic, honestly. Very bad guy. So it was Rulon Jeffs' opinion that spending some time with Winston Blackmore would set the Cook girls straight, but Victoria and Jamie had overheard Rulon Jeffs say that he thought the girls would make good wives for the men up there. And basically, when they got loaded up into this Suburban, they were nervous, the Cook girls, not only because they didn't know if they would ever be coming home. They thought they were just going to be sent to, Canada and married off to some guys in Bountiful, which probably was going to happen. But also they were nervous because it was very uncommon in Short Creek for 2 young girls to be allowed to be alone in the company of young men who were not their husbands without an adult female chaperone. I mean, this is what they got in trouble for to begin with, right? This is why they're being sent to Canada. And now this hypocritical power structure in Short Creek is like, we don't want you sneaking out to meet with boys, but we can put you alone with boys. That's okay. Now, Samuel Bateman at this time was in his early 20s, and Jamie Cook remembered that he sat in the front passenger seat and tried to lighten the tense mood by chatting with them and cracking jokes. Jamie said, quote, "A lot of it centered around how he had been rebellious, but then he had been forgiven. Once that happened, he had devoted himself to doing what's right and devoted himself to the prophet and the Lord." End quote. So as night fell, Jamie and Victoria, they fell asleep as they drove through Montana. But Victoria remembered being abruptly woken up when the Suburban they were driving in rolled after the driver had either nodded off or hit black ice on the road. It's unclear why this accident happened. All the passengers were thrown from the vehicle, and Victoria remembered how horrific it was. She saw her younger sister slumped against the snow, her body folded like a rag doll, and Samuel Bateman was lying nearby, wailing and moaning in pain. They were all airlifted to a nearby hospital in Missoula, and out of the 6 people in the SUV, Victoria Cook and Samuel Bateman were the most injured. Victoria had broken bones. She had a punctured lung and a spinal cord injury that would prevent her from ever walking again. And Samuel Bateman had reportedly suffered a significant brain injury, and those who knew him said he was never the same. His personality changed forever. He became even more strict and devout to his religious beliefs. Victoria Cook said, quote, "It was like night and day, the person that went in and the person that came out. He was friendly, and then he was rude and a bully, and I didn't even like him around." End quote. And Samuel's cousin, Lamont Barlow, said it was as if someone had flipped a light switch, and Samuel became a very different, very extreme person. I mean, even though Lamont Barlow also said that Samuel had already become extreme before this, so are we really trying to blame a brain injury for his disgusting, pedophilic, lecherous behavior? Are we? But that brings us to 2019, when Samuel Bateman was financially struggling due to his troubles in his job as an insurance salesman. Basically, he wasn't good at it. He wasn't making money, and he was miserable and hated himself. So he and a group of FLDS members from Short Creek traveled to Nebraska for work. While in Nebraska, feeling, possibly more free and out from under the eyes of the church elders in Short Creek, the group began discussing the fact that no one had gotten direct, instructions from Warren Jeffs since 2010. And so they all decided to pray directly to the Heavenly Father, hoping for some answers as to what they should do next. Samuel Bateman then informed the others that he had received a vision. And in that vision, he was told that Warren Jeffs had not been in touch with them because he was dead. He died in prison. And Bateman named himself the new prophet. Well, Bateman said that he got instructions from the heavens that he was the new prophet. But yeah, he basically just took advantage of the fact that Warren Jeffs wasn't around and everybody was looking for a leader and everybody wanted instructions and everybody wanted to be led. And he was like, "You want to be led? I will lead you. Not well, but I will lead you somewhere." Bateman and his new followers returned to Short Creek in 2021, where Bateman basically assumed power, and he just walked in. He was like, "I'm in charge now," and everybody was like, "Okay." And at that point, he became obsessed with accumulating money and material possessions, even though he didn't have a job. Oh, and he also became obsessed with accumulating wives. Samuel Bateman made his male followers go out and work and give him a percentage of their earnings. I'm sure Samuel Bateman has huge stock in Velociraptor, which, remember, is not a dinosaur. It is a company created by Torrance Bisline, who, as it also turns out, in my opinion, allegedly is a scumbag. And Samuel Bateman not only made his male followers give him their money, but he also made them give him some of their wives and daughters. Basically, this guy, Samuel Bateman, he is twisted. There's a million things wrong with him. I don't even know where to start. But I guess I'll start with what the FBI and local law enforcement found when they raided Short Creek on September 13th, 2022. As I had said earlier, they went into two houses, a greenhouse where Bateman lived with his wives and a blue house about 2 blocks away from the greenhouse where a man named Maroney Johnson lived with 2 brothers, Torrance and Liddell Bisline. First, we'll start with the greenhouse where Samuel Bateman lived, and next to that greenhouse, there's a white trailer that's been converted into a sewing room for Samuel Bateman's wives. When you enter the green home into the foyer, or in this case, the prayer room, you will see a big picture, a rendering of a 40-bedroom, multi-million-dollar compound with the words, "Coming soon." Let me allow Samuel Bateman to explain to you himself what this huge mansion is and what it represents.
Okay, so I like showing visual. Visual will open your creative mind, the part of your subconscious mind that will start generating the power to achieve what you think. So these pictures were in my mind, and by the grace of God, because of that dream that I was given, it wasn't 7 months later before those 2 cars were sitting in that driveway just like I saw. Now, how in the world could that possibly happen any other way than to believe? That is so important. What you believe strongly, what you talk about, what you think about, you will bring about. And it all starts in your thoughts. So in order to have success, we have to have a paradigm shift. What you think about, what you talk about, what you strongly think about and intensely desire, you will bring about. I had a dream, and I saw in this dream the Queen of England, and I believe that that's part of my mission is to bring the Queen of England to my home. And she's not going to come to the house that I live in. It's just a crusty old house. So So this is what we've drawn up here. I put this, I believe it, and I know it'll happen. That is approximately a $15 or $20 million home. It will have around 40 bedrooms. It will have an indoor swimming pool, an under the ground garage. You can tell this is up by Fish Cove. It's up past the graveyard. And as you begin to bring your goals into a visual, so you visualize them, you actually picture this as though this was already done. And it will begin attracting ways and means. Many people call it the universe. I call it God. God will bring into my life the things that I need to bring about these goals.
So I guess we could consider the picture of this mansion to be Samuel Bateman's vision board in a way, something he was going to will into existence, like he willed his 2 Bentleys into existence, even though he didn't, right? He just stole money from his followers and then bought the cars. And these are expensive cars, very expensive. Like, I can't remember exactly how much they are, but it was some figure that stunned me, like $100,000 or something each. And we will see as we go through these spaces where Samuel Bateman and his followers lived, it was a cult that had a regimented schedule, a cult that catered to and deferred to their leader, Samuel Bateman. It reminds me a lot of the Heaven's Gate cult, which I actually did a series on. I used to do series on cults. I don't know why I haven't. I mean, I guess I am right now, aren't I? But I used to do a series on cults, and the Heaven's Gate cult had this very structured, regimented schedule where everybody knew what they had to do every minute of the day. They knew where they were supposed to be every minute of the day, and it left very little room for independent thinking. And the Heaven's Gate cult, they were the ones who believed they were leaving Earth on the Hale-Bopp comet. They all died in matching tracksuits and sneakers. I'll link the videos in the description box if you want to check them out. But you can tell just by hearing him talk that Samuel Bateman is someone who's probably read The Secret 5 million times, and he can probably quote passages from it as easily as he can quote passages from the Book of Mormon, maybe more easily. And at its most basic, the law of attraction, which is what he talks about all the time, it's a philosophy suggesting that positive thoughts bring positive results into a person's life, which is fine. I'm not really a big believer of it, I believe in positive thinking over negative thinking, but some people take it to a whole different level, believing that they can actually manifest physical objects. So basically, they're going to use the law of attraction to make them rich, famous, even beautiful, give them everything they want just with the power of positive thinking and never giving up. It's a trendy thing right now. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad if you believe that. And like I said, I believe you should obviously practice positive thinking, and I do believe there is some power in that. But I also feel that this law of attraction thing can be very problematic and dangerous if you take it too far, or if you're already not super mentally healthy, like Samuel Bateman, because in a lot of ways, manifesting massively overestimates our agency as human beings and our ability to control the outside world. It is really a form of magical thinking, which, children take part in magical thinking, but you are supposed to grow out of that at some point. So, like I said, I think it's a given that positive thinking is better than negative thinking. There is a lot of science that proves, mind over matter. You can make yourself healthier by thinking positive. You can make yourself sick by thinking negative. However, I think truly believing that you can manifest yourself a Bentley or a mansion fit for the Queen of England is nuts. Nuts. It's a banana split with extra nuts like Samuel Bateman. And as far as I can tell, Samuel Bateman wasn't manifesting shit. He was making everyone else around him work and pay him money and, basically like capitalizing off of that. And Bateman told people during a YouTube video that he was in contact with billionaires and very smart financial people like Mark Cuban who were giving him financial advice. And he said he'd spent $70,000 on business mentorship programs. So he's actually trying to give advice to other people about how they can start their businesses and how they can be successful like him, even though his success isn't based on anything he's doing. and he has no place to be giving this advice. And his advice basically is, if you can dream it, you can be it, which is great advice, but also not the only thing you have to do, because success also takes a certain amount of luck, a certain amount of hard work, a certain amount of, things lining up, a certain amount of you being prepared and having advantages in your younger years so that you're set up to succeed. Connections, there's a lot that goes into it. Anyways, also in the foyer or the prayer room, there was a framed photo of Warren Jeffs with the words, "He is free." Because, according to Samuel Bateman, Warren Jeffs is dead, even though Warren Jeffs, I don't know if I told you this, he's not actually dead. He's just in prison, and he's publicly denounced Samuel Bateman and said hey, I'm not dead. And Samuel Bateman's a hack, but I guess people just thought he was dead. And this is a reminder that Warren Jeffs is dead. He is free. He's free. Now, if law enforcement actually wanted to do some rabble-rousing and cause some issues in Short Creek in the FLDS community, they should just let Warren Jeffs record a video to his followers being listen, guys, I'm here. I'm alive. This isn't some ploy by the U.S. government or law enforcement to make you think that I'm still alive when I'm dead. Here I am. Here's a newspaper with today's date. And by the way, Samuel Bateman sucks. You guys shouldn't follow him. And then just see what happens, because maybe people would actually, listen to Warren Jeffs and stop following Samuel Bateman. And I don't know. Or maybe it would cause another civil war. Probably that. And then there is an actual vision board in the prayer room with pictures of private jets, PJs, mansions, ATVs, and the monthly Velociraptor goal, which is 16, if you care to know. Get to selling, FLDS followers. Daddy needs another Bentley. Sell 16 of those Velociraptors, which is not a dinosaur. It's an invention of Torrance Bisline's. But literally, they should make their logo like a Velociraptor. Because that Velociraptor, they should make their logo that. Free business advice, better than any business advice Samuel Bateman's ever given you, I'm sure. So there's also a bookshelf in this house. It's got the funniest mix of books. There's financial books and business books, Quick Books for Dummies and The Power of Zero by David McKnight. This book, I'm actually familiar with it. I don't even want to talk about why I'm familiar with it, because I used to have a job that was very corporate and very pressureful, and we had to read all of these self-help books like Think and Get Rich. We also had to read The Secret. I don't want to talk about it. It's a very traumatic time for me. But The Power of Zero is a book that's supposedly meant to guide a person step by step on how to get to a 0% tax bracket, how to basically defraud the U.S. government and how to make it so that it looks like you're taking more losses than you're making income so that you don't have to pay taxes. Which, it makes sense that somebody like the FLDS church would want to do that because they are not considered a legitimate church by the U.S. government, so they're not tax deductible. They still have to pay taxes. So I guess they're trying to find a way to not pay taxes, which tells you a lot, I think, about somebody. But there were some religious books and a book of baby names, the essentials, faith, finances, family. Then we have yet another vision board. This one's got pictures of Range Rovers on it, Bentleys, food storage, granaries, gold, a 41-passenger bus, all the things you need to be truly happy in this world, all the things anyone measures their success on. You can't take the Bentleys and the buses with you to the afterlife, but you could take all your wives that are going to fit in this 41-passenger bus. Now, in fact, Samuel Bateman did already have 2 Bentleys that he had manifested, and he was known to drive around in these Bentleys wearing a white leather jacket in a single-file motorcade. So the 2 Bentleys with, Bateman and some of his wives in the middle, sandwiched by Range Rovers, and then there's Range Rovers in front of him and Range Rovers in back of him, just in case somebody's trying to take him out or something like JFK. So a lot of the locals noticed this flashiness because, Short Creek's a little community. You're being super extra. Why are you drawing all this attention to yourself? And a lot of the locals had also seen Bateman driving around town in his truck, pulling a flatbed behind it. And on that flatbed sat his many wives, Like I said, many of them actual children. Yes, Samuel Bateman had been trying to be as flashy and obvious as Warren Jeffs, and he had succeeded in bringing attention to himself, which is actually what caused an investigation to be opened into him in June of 2022, I believe. So like I said, Short Creek used to be dominated by FLDS, but a lot of people have left the FLDS church since, and a lot of non-FLDS people have settled there. I think their mayor is the first non-FLDS mayor in like the history of Short Creek at this point, or in the history of like Colorado City, Arizona at least. You know, they're technically not considered this. Like Short Creek is Hilldale and Colorado City, but they're obviously in two different states, so they're not considered the same community when it comes to politics and stuff. But the mayor of Colorado City is not FLDS, so it's definitely become more of a mixed community now. And a lot of those people in this mixed community do not like what the FLDS is doing, and seeing that Samuel Bateman is driving around with his wives, who are actual literal children, caused them to call into local law enforcement and report it, and that's what started the investigation. So moving on to the blue house down the road from the greenhouse. The blue house, it's a bit bigger, and there's more bedrooms in it, I think, and there's bunk beds in the bedrooms, you know, for all of the women to sleep in. There's also pictures of Warren Jeffs on the walls and other FLDS church leaders like Rulon Jeffs and Brigham Young, but I think the most telling thing about this house was the daily schedule that was posted in the home's common area. Okay, 4:30 to 5:30 a.m. Wake up, personal prayer, and improvement. 5:30 to 6:15 a.m. Class and prayers. 6:15 to 6:30 a.m. Breakfast. 6:30 to 6:45 a.m. Breakfast and cleanup. 6:45 to 7:30 a.m. Morning exercise. 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. School, home, yard, sewing, work. So basically, I think that means, like, depending on how old you are and what your place is as Samuel Bateman's wife, you would go to your respective thing. So if you're young, like school age, you'd go to school. Or maybe you're a home wife and you stay home and cook and get meals on and clean. Or maybe you're doing yard work. Or maybe you're going into the trailer and sewing. Or maybe you're going to work, probably at like the Velociraptor fact, where it looked like Samuel Bateman had set up like a call center where these women would work answering calls. 12 to 12:30 p.m. lunch. 12:30 to 1 p.m. lunch cleanup. 1 to 3 personal improvement. 1 to 3 personal improvement? What are we doing for 2 hours personal improvement when you've already got personal improvement between 4:30 and 5:30 and you've already exercised, you know, from 6:45 to 7:30? What is the personal improvement? Okay. Anyways, 3 to 5, home and yard. 5 to 6, evening exercise. 6 to 6:30, dinner. 6:30 to 7 p.m., class and prayer. 7 to 8 p.m., cleanup. 8 to 8:30 p.m., home and yard evening prep. What is that? 8:30 to 10, personal evening prep. And then 10:30 p.m., asleep. You know what it reminds me of? Those vlogs where people are like, this is what I do. This is my morning routine. They get up at like 4 a.m. and then they like slap themselves in the face, you know, and like splash like battery acid in their face to wake up. And then they're like, and then for an hour, I read personal improvement to, you know, get my mind going. And they're reading like self-help books. And then they're like, and then, you know, by 5:30, I am in the gym because I like to break a sweat every day. And then I have my coffee with butter, my bulletproof coffee. And, you know, it reminds me of those like really unrealistic, impossible to be happy in morning routines. But okay. Reportedly, near this property were 2 trailers that housed 2 more Bistline brothers, Truxton and Skye, who were the sons of Maria Bistline, who was one of Samuel Bateman's wives. Also, Naomi Bistline is one of Samuel Bateman's wives. So who is Naomi to Maria? Is Naomi Maria's daughter? So Samuel Bateman's married to both mother and daughter? Who knows? But it's not the craziest thing that Samuel Bateman's done or FLDS people have done. Moving on to the warehouse in Colorado City that I believe housed the Velociraptor company. Not a dinosaur. And this was also where Samuel Bateman would spend some time during the day as he put his wives to work sewing in a trailer or answering phones in a call center that he had set up there. But when the women weren't busy answering everyone's burning Velociraptor cord wrapping questions, they were making their husband and their profit a plethora of different drinks throughout the day. A list of these drink recipes, along with a schedule of when they should be hand-delivered to Bateman, was found in the warehouse near a whiteboard, where a message was also written. The message on the whiteboard said, "Father dear, I love you. I need you." Father wishes that all of his drinks are on time, the schedule informed, before instructing how to make a maca shake that would be delivered at 7 a.m., a goo that is true to be delivered at 10 a.m., a spinach smoothie to be delivered at 12 p.m., and a bulletproof coffee delivered at 3 p.m. What the hell is a goo that is true? Should we look it up? So I can't find anything about it on Google, which makes me think that it's just like something Samuel Bateman made up. And the fact that it's goo that is true sounds like it's like a religious thing, like goo that is true. Goo that is true to my body. I don't know, man, but it sounds gross. So you also have a bunch of like sayings that are written on this list of drinks and their recipes, affirmations as well as tasks to complete. So for instance, they wrote down like focus on the activity, not the results. Okay? Don't worry about why you're doing something or what you're going to achieve from doing it. Just keep doing. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. Keep going. Keep going. That's actually written there. Keep going. Keep going. Stay level. Listen to vids. Schedule, schedule, schedule. And cult leaders love their schedules, right? Well, it's not their schedule. It's the schedule they expect everyone else to follow. But cult leaders love to give their followers schedules to keep them busy, to keep them not focused on the outcome, but just what they're doing, right? So from the warehouse, federal agents seized computers, hard drives, Samuel Bateman's birth certificate, handwritten notes and journals, several cell phones, and 2 adult toys. You know, because that's something you need in the workplace. And on that note, let's talk about the 9 young girls who were also removed from Short Creek on that same day. The 9 underage girls were taken into custody and given initial interviews, and during these initial interviews, none of them disclosed sexual abuse on the part of Samuel Bateman, but one girl did say she was present and partially nude during one of his infamous sex orgies. A federal agent scheduled additional interviews with 5 of the 9 girls who had mentioned sleeping with Bateman in bed, or who had written in their journals about kissing him or touching him. According to the FBI, the girls refused to participate or cooperate fully in this interview or in these interviews with the federal agents, and the federal agents claimed they believed some of the older girls were influencing the younger girls not to talk. And obviously, we know that the 3 wives, Naomi, Moretta, and the other one, Danae, they were definitely influencing these 9 underage girls, their sister wives, to not talk to the authorities. So the 9 girls were separated from each other. They were kept with their siblings, which is devastating to think that literal families, actual whole families have been destroyed by this dude and by this practice of child wife taking. But they were kept with their siblings, and then they were placed in different group homes around the Arizona area. And during her time in the homes, one of the girls did disclose that she'd been sexually abused by Samuel Bateman. And then on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, all but one of the 9 girls left their group homes. And when police recovered the electronics that they left behind, it was discovered that the girls had been talking to 3 of Bateman's older wives using the Signal application. The wives they were communicating with were the same women charged with kidnapping: Naomi Bisline, Moretta Rose Johnson, and Danae Barlow. Additionally, in some journals left behind, the girls wrote that today is the day we're going home. But they didn't go home. They didn't return to Short Creek. They were taken basically, across the country to be hidden. At about 8:30 p.m. that night that the girls all left the group home, from jail, Samuel Bateman made a video call to his adult wives. This video call was recorded because he was in jail, and it shows 2 of Bateman's adult wives sitting in a car. One is driving, and one is in the passenger seat. The one in the passenger seat was holding the phone. Now, the wife in the passenger seat let Bateman know that they had 2 of the minor wives with them, and she used code names E1 and E2 to describe the 2 girls who were also in the vehicle in the back seat. Do you think Samuel Bateman did not know that these calls were being recorded? Like, I feel like you know, and you're told that they're being recorded. And on that note, why are we letting this piece of shit make any video calls from jail? Like, it's bad enough to let him have a call. Like, he calls his lawyer and that's it. He does not need to be communicating with his cult members. So during the same call, the wife in the passenger seat told her husband, Samuel Bateman, that they'd all changed their last names to Rapidly Bateman to match his. And Bateman tells the two women and the two girls in the car, "I'm in holy fucking love with you." And then he proceeded to say each of their names using their new last name. So I don't know why the adult wives bothered to use code names when this clown was just going to go ahead and announce their names out loud like a straight creep, putting his last name at the end. 'Cause he's a freaking creep, man. Ugh. So at around 7:30 a.m. the next morning, Bateman made another video call from jail to the wife who'd been in the passenger seat the night before. And during this call, it looked as if this woman was in a hotel room of some sort. And Bateman asked her why W2, which is another code name for the girl who decided to not run away from DCF custody. He asked why W2 was not with them. Now, court records indicate that the girl referred to as W2 is between 11 and 12 years old. And Samuel Bateman, the lecherous old loon that he is, took her as a wife in May of 2020. And if we do that simple math, that means she was 9 or 10 years old when she was forced to marry Samuel Bateman, who was in his 40s. And a disgusting pervert. The passenger seat wife, who was talking to Bateman, she informed him that W2 was the only wife who had not left with them, but they had tried. And apparently Bateman didn't think that they'd tried hard enough because he instructed passenger seat wife to, quote, go get that girl because she needed to be with them because he felt a lot of pressure when they weren't all together, when they were all scattered. Basically, I'll fix this for you, Samuel Bateman. You feel a lot of pressure that this girl had finally broken free and was going to start talking about what you were doing to her, allegedly, in my opinion. So you really wanted her with your three wives who, you know, are little Ghislaine Maxwells at this point and are just enabling your abuse and are going to either manipulate or scare this girl into not talking. And that's why you don't want your wives all scattered all over. You don't care about them being together. You just care that they're not turning you in. So during this call, the camera panned from the two adult wives to the 8 underage girls, and Bateman asked, "Are you in our state?" And the adult wives replied, "No. The mothers are in Arizona headed to New Mexico with the babies." Bateman also made a video call to 19-year-old Moretta Rose Johnson, who officials believe became Bateman's wife when she was under the age of 18, considering I believe she has a child with him, and that child is over a year old. So, 9 months to be pregnant plus a year out of the womb. That's putting conception at, an age below 18. But anyways, Moretta Johnson was in the hotel room with her baby and at least one other wife during this call. And during all of these calls, the adult wives spoke about being on the move. And on November 28th, the evening of November 28th, one of the women mentioned cleaning out one of their vehicles and then being able to swap the vehicles. But basically, with all this covert operation behavior, police were still able to track them down. The FBI learned that a credit card, which belonged to a cousin of one of the wives, had been used for an Airbnb. And on November 28th, an emergency disclosure request was made to Airbnb, and the request was basically like, hey, we know this dude booked one of your houses, and we're going to need the address of that house that this credit card booked, along with any other houses booked with this credit card or under this cousin's name, since apparently this guy is a man who's a huge follower of Samuel Bateman, and he's made reservations at Airbnbs for members of the cult before. And by November 30th, Airbnb provided law enforcement with an address in Spokane, Washington. The house had been reserved on the app from November 29th to December 2nd. On December 1st, a sergeant with the Spokane County Sheriff's Department knocked on the door of the Airbnb. No one answered, but his backup witnessed the occupants of the house attempting to leave in a vehicle with Moretta Rose Johnson identified as the driver. This vehicle was pursued, it was pulled over, and all 8 of Samuel Bateman's underage wives, literal children, who'd been taken by the state into their care so it could be determined what was happening to them. And then these 3 adult women orchestrated a kidnapping of these children, took them over state lines and hid them from law enforcement while they continued to communicate with their husband and their prophet. All 8 of those children were in the car and recovered. So let's go through the FBI affidavit and see what they've dug up on Samuel Bateman during their investigation into him. In May of 2020, Bateman told one of his male followers, a man named Moroni Johnson, that he would be taking Johnson's daughter as his wife. This daughter was born in 2010, making her 9 or 10 years old in 2020. I'm leaning towards 9 years old because the wife of Moroni Johnson claimed that Samuel Bateman came to their home and took several of their daughters, including the youngest, who was 9. And the mother believes that Bateman raped her 9-year-old daughter because her older daughters communicated to her that the youngest daughter had been wetting the bed, which apparently disgusted Samuel Bateman, especially when the urine got on him. Oh, the balls of this guy to literally sexually abuse a 9-year-old child and complain when she's so terrified and so traumatized that she pees the bed like a child who's terrified and doesn't feel safe does. I want to kick him in the face with a very sharp high heel and then kick him in the balls with that same high heel. And anyways, let's move on. A law enforcement informant close to the child brides told the FBI that Moroni Johnson was in anguish and extreme stress about having to give his youngest daughter to Bateman. But Moroni Johnson remained a faithful follower, even when Bateman took one of Moroni's wives. Actually, I think he took a couple of Moroni's wives, including Donna Barlow, who, get this, was actually Moroni Johnson's stepdaughter before she was his wife, because he married her mother and then took her also as a wife. Donna Barlow was Moroni's stepdaughter, and then she was his wife, and now she's Samuel Bateman's wife, but she's also in prison for kidnapping. And Moretta Rose Johnson is also Moroni's daughter, but now she's Samuel Bateman's wife, and now she's in prison for kidnapping. So now Moroni has come out and spoken out against Bateman since Bateman's arrest. Not before, not when he took your 9-year-old daughter for his child bride, just now that the dude's been arrested, and you don't want to look like the piece of shit that you are for allowing that to happen. Let's see what Moroni Johnson has to say, that piece of shit. The headline is exclusive. Samuel Bateman follower tells how the depraved prophet took advantage of his Mormon faith and forced him to have sex with his wife in front of his daughters to teach them how to please the cult leader before cutting him off from his family. A former follower of self-styled prophet Samuel Rappy Lee Bateman has told how the depraved 46-year-old took advantage of his deep-seated Mormon faith and controlled him with a toxic mix of physical, mental, and sexual abuse. So devoted was businessman Moroni Johnson, 51. He allowed scheming Bateman to marry several of his wives and most of his daughters and funded his lavish lifestyle, which included 2 sprawling homes in Colorado City, Arizona, and a fleet of Bentley cars. I wouldn't call the homes sprawling, but okay. He took part in humiliating rituals on Bateman's orders and was on one occasion made to have sex with one of his wives in front of their daughters in order to show them how to please the pervert prophet. He made you do that? He made you, like, with a gun to your head, Moroni? You jackass? You got some nerve calling Samuel Bateman depraved when you are clearly also depraved. And despite his obedience to the man he believed was the voice of God on earth, Johnson was being lined up for a bizarre ritual called blood atonement that would have ended with his death at the time Bateman was arrested in August. Speaking in an exclusive interview with DailyMail.com, Johnson said, "We were taught perfect obedience produces perfect faith. If there is a supreme being, wouldn't you want to meet him?" He, Bateman, prayed on our devotion to Scripture. For Johnson, the impending trial is the latest twist in a story that has seen him lose nearly all he held dear while dealing with the betrayal of a man in whom he truly believed. Johnson told DailyMail.com his faith in Bateman endured, even after he had been ordered to hand over his underage daughters against his wishes and had been ostracized for a year due to his reluctance to give them up. Why don't you just leave? Why don't you take your daughters and leave? Why don't you do something, you idiot, you freaking idiot? An FBI affidavit filed in Spokane reveals his anguish and confusion at having to give up his younger girls, but Johnson says he felt he had no choice. You had a choice, telling DailyMail.com he would just see a woman and say, "She's mine." He co-opted our love for the prophets. He added, "At that point, who was I to question God? I don't know a person with a brain in your head." The scales only fell from his eyes after his first wife, named in court papers daughters as JJ, revealed Bateman had been planning his death and had wanted to include her in the blood atonement ritual. He said, JJ has never told a lie in her life. When she told me that something turned in me, he would have made her an accomplice to murder. He's already made her an accomplice to child rape, as are you, okay? So why are you surprised that he's going to make her an accomplice to anything? Yo, I like how this article tries to make it seem like Bateman is just this, like, offshoot renegade, but Johnson comes from a family that has produced FLDS prophets, among them his grandfather, Leroy. So, like, Samuel Bateman's nobody. He shouldn't even be the prophet. I should be the prophet. It's in my blood. An athlete and a hard worker, he set up a construction business and married first wife JJ when she was 20 and he was 24. The couple went on to have 5 daughters. Later, he married his second wife, named as PB in court papers, and later took several of her daughters as his wives too. Among them AB, with whom he has 2 teen daughters, and ZB, who is the mother of an 18-month-old baby. The family moved from Utah to Lincoln, Nebraska, where they lived a happy life, a contentment that was shattered when Bateman came into their lives. Somewhere between 2007 and 2019, no, it was 2019. Bateman decided Jeffs was no longer the FLDS prophet and that he was the true conduit to God, proclaiming himself prophet to an unimpressed Lydia. So Lydia was Samuel Bateman's first wife. More seriously, he also laid claim to their teenage daughter, bribing her with $50, 2 large bags of Dorito, and a promise of an airplane ride where she'd become his wife. It was too much for Lydia, who told Bateman the girl was not and would never be his wife, took their daughter, and left. Good, Lydia. Good on you, Lydia. Now, Moroni Johnson, why didn't you do that? Why couldn't you do that? See, Lydia left because she didn't want her daughter to be abused by a madman and a sexual predator. So why didn't you do that? Why? Lydia eventually filed for divorce and negotiated a custody agreement that banned Bateman from having any contact with the girl. Due to his behavior, Bateman was kicked out of the FLDS by Jeffs in an order handed down from prison and sank into despair, eventually moving to Nebraska, where he begged Johnson, a former employee, for help. Johnson said, Sam was from an unpopular family, and he had alcohol problems in his youth. When he walked in, I thought he fit the description of the worst possible employee, someone you'd never want to hire. That was him. Bateman also failed to mention he'd been kicked out of the FLDS. By the time he did, it was too late for Johnson, who had become one of his small but growing band of Samuelites. Johnson says Bateman preyed on his family's religious beliefs, one of which included the FLDS belief that their religion produces prophets who become the voice of God on earth. He believes Bateman targeted his family due to their standing in the community. He would often speak of having a vendetta against royalty and began humiliating him, first by giving him the silent treatment and ignoring him when he asked how he had upset him. Next, he began to demand wives from among Johnson's daughters, beginning with his 3 eldest, including Moretta, who's currently languishing in jail. Johnson believes Bateman involved Moretta in his plan to take his 9 underage wives from group homes in Phoenix. Yeah, he did definitely involve Moretta in his plan, but Moroni Johnson thinks that he did it to humiliate Moroni and is distraught over the kidnapping charges she faces, which could see her jailed for 20 years, rightly so. As Bateman's behavior became more outlandish, he took more wives from Johnson's family, his 2 younger daughters, now 16 and 13, with JJ, and his own wife, AB, and their 2 daughters, now aged 14 and 12. He also took 3 more of Johnson's wives, 2 women known as AB and BB in the court papers, and Donna Barlow, a stepdaughter turned wife of Johnson's, who is now in jail in Flagstaff for her part in the underage wives' escape. Further humiliations came. A species right dubbed the Binding of Brothers that saw a drunken Bateman sexually assault Johnson in front of his family, and the leak of an audio tape in which Johnson was coerced into saying he would give up his wives to Bateman. He was coerced? Oh my God. Bateman refused to ask for the video to be taken down from YouTube despite Johnson receiving a barrage of abuse online after it was published. What did you think, Moroni Johnson, that a video of you agreeing to give a man, a 40-something-year-old man, your underage daughters, agreeing to give your daughters to this man as his wives? What did you think you were going to get from that? When it was online, a barrage of love, you dumbass. On top of that, Bateman also insisted his followers give embarrassing confessions that he would often then share publicly. Bateman's other followers were also made to give up their families and take parts in rituals. Liddell Bistline Jr., 47, handed over his wife of 20 years and their teen daughters, while both he and brother Torrance, 34, were ordered to have sex with Bateman's underage wives. Oh, they were ordered? They were ordered. Oh, they couldn't say no. They were like, oh, we really don't want to do this, but we're ordered and we have to. Gross. Gross. On one occasion, named The Atonement by Bateman, Torrance had anal sex with one of Johnson's stepdaughters, who was then just 13. For Johnson, the situation got worse when Bateman began kissing the hand of his 18-month-old daughter in the same way he kissed the hands of his other wives, the implied threat being he would take her too. Yeah, you think? As time went on, Bateman would profess to be annoyed with Johnson, gradually ostracizing him and telling him he wasn't worthy, among other things, to ride in his Bentleys. One day he flew into a rage when Johnson and Torrance began singing a popular song entitled Largo, which he describes as a prayer within a song. Johnson said, "Who's singing there?" He said, "I'm sitting in the room with the ladies and every one of them was stirred by it. This is wicked." By the time Bateman was arrested in August, Johnson had been ostracized for almost a year, unable to speak to his daughters, but still controlled by Bateman, who continued to demand money. I don't understand how you can be ostracized, how you can be not getting any of the benefits from being involved in the community, be ostracized from it, but still be under his spell and still be forced to give away your family members and your money when you're ostracized. What are you talking about? Now, if that wasn't a sign to you to get the hell out of there like Lydia, Bateman's first wife, did, what would be the sign? What would be the sign? Him being arrested? And now you knowing you have no protection, and now you knowing that people are going to start looking at you and your part in this, and now you're like, shit, I better do some damage control. Get out of here, Maroney. The lengthy punishment came after a meeting in which Bateman said Johnson had committed 11 sins. One of them was an attempt to protect his young daughters, and another a failure to treat him like a prophet by objecting to his designs on his youngest children. Maroney said, "I lay with my face on the floor at his feet and wept because I thought I had displeased God. It wasn't because he told me, but because I thought I had done wrong." Had Bateman not been arrested when he was, Johnson believes he could have ended up dead, with the self-styled prophet planning to target him for blood atonement. After wife JJ confronted him with Bateman's plans, she then convinced him to begin helping the FBI, despite him having refused to speak to agents when they first approached him. He said of the first approach, "I honestly thought they were going to take me away. I didn't touch any juveniles, but I witnessed it." And you touched juveniles, Maroney. You touched your underage daughters and handed them over to a grown-ass man that you knew was going to marry them and sexually abuse them. You touched juveniles. You sure did. Okay. Johnson is now trying to rebuild his life in the shadow of the investigation, and despite knowing he too could face charges for his part in Bateman's schemes, he should face charges. If he doesn't, I'm going to have a big problem. He spent Thanksgiving with JJ and their 4 sons and is hoping to have his daughters return to JJ, who's living separately from Johnson, in the hopes of showing Child Protection Services she can give them a safe home. Oh, good Lord. Good Lord. Let's continue on. We also found out from the FBI investigation that Samuel Bateman attempted to marry his own teenage daughter, a daughter that he had with his first wife, Lydia. Bateman then married a bunch of his followers' daughters and wives, and he actually FaceTimed his own teenage daughter and demanded that she call all of these, underage girls' mother, even though many of them were younger than she was. And as we touched on during the article I read, Bateman demanded that his followers take part in a series of sex-based rituals known as the Atonement. And during one of these rituals, allegedly, Torrance Bisline was ordered to have anal sex with one of Bateman's wives, who was only 13 at the time. He was forced to do it, right? He couldn't have said no, right? No? He was forced to get the hell out of here. Every single one of these men needs to be locked up forever. The key needs to be thrown away, and then the whole ass building needs to be set on fire. Theoretically, of course, I am not saying we should actually set these people on fire. It's not medieval times, although sometimes times like these, I wish it was. And we have FBI Special Agent Don Martin, who was given a recording from November of 2021, during which Samuel Bateman can be heard claiming that the Heavenly Father had instructed him to give the most precious thing that he has to 3 of his male followers. And the most precious thing he had, apparently, was the virtue of his 3 young daughters. Samuel Bateman allegedly watched these 3 men rape his daughters, one of whom was only 12 years old at the time, and he can be heard saying that his daughters had sacrificed their virtue for the Lord, but God will fix their bodies and put the membrane back into their bodies. I'm going to play you a quick clip of Samuel Bateman talking about this blood atonement, during which he claims that his male followers would beg to be murdered by him. So I'm going to play that clip while I calm myself.
People get scared because they hear, blood atonement, and you kill them when you bury them in the backyard. No, that's not all it is. It's an open thing. But I promise there'll be men who beg to have their blood spilled, because they will feel there's an eternal judgment. The only way they can fill that bill is to shed their blood and die, and the Lord will give them eternal life. There's payments. Every time we do wrong, there is a payment that is needed.
Okay, let's talk about the 3 women arrested, Samuel Bateman's 3 wives, who I have named Ghislaine Maxwell 1, 2, and 3. Now, I know that these women were girls once. They were children once. And yes, they may have been victims too, but they aren't girls anymore. They aren't little children anymore. And in my opinion, I'm going to be straight out with you guys. I know this may be an unpopular opinion. I have no sympathy for them at this point. Your heart and soul knows what's right and what's wrong. No matter what kind of idiot prophet is screaming from the hilltops something different. Your heart knows. You on a cellular level, on a very deep level, you know when something feels wrong and icky and harmful. So when these 3 women decided to take these children back to Samuel Bateman and decided to get them out of the hands of people who truly wanted to help them, when they decided to enable a pedophile and allow him to continue hurting these children as maybe they had potentially been hurt, a part of them knew it was wrong, and they don't get any excuses from me. I'm sorry. Like I said, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but if you hurt children or animals, you're done. You're done for me. Everybody has a choice. Many people are sexually abused in their youth, and some of them go on to repeat that cycle, and some of them decide to break that cycle. If you decide to go on and continue the cycle, I have no sympathy for you. I don't. I have no pity. Now, Naomi Bisline is 24 years old, and according to her lawyer, she's relieved. She's relieved to be away from it all finally. Dan Kaiser, her lawyer, said, quote, "She's beginning to understand how victimized she was. She's realizing she had loving family members independent of the cult that are there to support her, and she was for the most part cut off from all of that," end quote. I don't know how many family members Naomi had outside of the FLDS church, but I do know that her entire family were huge supporters of Warren Jeffs. Huge. Like, tried to help him escape on his private jet so he wouldn't be, arrested. Also, from what I can tell, Naomi has a 1-year-old daughter, so in my opinion, let's put Naomi behind bars and let's get the daughter out of the Short Creek LDS or FLDS kind of community before she turns 9, which is apparently the age where she's ready to be married off to one of her uncles or to her stepfather, or just handed to some lecherous old man by her own father. Because we know that's what Samuel Bateman does to his daughters. That's what all of these men do to their daughters, apparently, even though they want to act like they're not responsible and they want to act like they were manipulated to do it. They all do it. And Donna Barlow, also 24, echoed Naomi's sentiments, saying she's also been victimized. Her lawyer, Robert McVickers, said, quote, "She has been catapulted into a world foreign to her, and her incarceration is compounding the trauma she's already endured in her young life," end quote. What about the trauma that she's forced literal children to endure when she should have been saving them, when she should have been protecting them? But she enabled their abuse. What about their trauma? McVickers goes on to say, Donna is experiencing unimaginable agony being separated from her child. This is also the first time she's been separated from her mother, sister, and other close family members, end quote. Considering that Donna Barlow's family members literally founded this place where old men force themselves on, I'll say it again, literal children, and considering I'm pretty sure she's related to Samuel Bateman, I know that the Johnson family is because Bateman's father was Marani Johnson's first cousin, but considering that her family literally stems from one of the founders of this polygamous pedophile paradise, I think it's okay for her to go a few weeks without talking to them or seeing them. I'm sorry. I just don't have a lot of empathy for these women at this point because it seems so convenient to me that they've now seen the light after the arrest of Samuel Bateman, their prophet and their husband. Now they see that they've been victimized, but they don't talk about the victims they created. Now they see that it's bad news bears over there in Short Creek, but this wasn't even a thought on their horizon for them before because Bateman, he's locked up now. But they still went ahead and orchestrated the kidnapping of 8 minor girls so that these girls would no longer be safe and that these girls would be back in that community that they claim now is so toxic. Who forced you to do that? He's locked up in prison, man, locked up in prison. Who forced you to do that? Once again, you had a choice. He wasn't physically there. You could pack up, leave, put your high-necked blouse down, get a t-shirt, and take off at any time. You didn't. And we're supposed to believe now, as soon as you get in trouble for what you did, which was illegal, the spell's broken. Now you see, now you understand, now you're, healed from it. No. None of these 3 women should see the light of day for at least a few years. Let them dry out like an alcoholic. They need to be away from their substance. Let them dry out. Do not send them back to that community because nothing will change, and do not give them their children back because not one of these people we've talked about in this video should ever be around children unsupervised ever again. Okay, they don't respect the sanctity of childhood. They don't respect the innocence of childhood. Now, I'm not saying that Samuel Bateman's adult wives need to go away for life, but they did enable the child rape. Like, I'm just going to say it. They enabled it. They allowed it to happen. So they need a few years behind bars to be deprogrammed. Maybe get a GED, learn about the world out there, see the men did land on the moon, really steep in that pain that they've caused by going along with all of this, really understand the trauma that they've caused these children, the wounds that they've helped create in these children that will never be healed, the innocence and the pureness that they stood by and watched stripped from these children. That is a crime. That's a crime. And no amount of justice will ever make it right for those kids. But these 3 women, they need to sit and they need to think on that for a few years at least. And then maybe I'll hear what they have to say. And then maybe I can start looking at them as victims once they've, cleaned out the cobwebs in their head that allowed them to ever think going along with this was a good idea. And also allowed them to think that I believe in an instant, overnight, they've seen the light. No. You're in a cult. You're in a cult. You've been programmed. You've been manipulated. You've been brainwashed. I 100% agree with that, but you are not unbrainwashed in a moment. As soon as you get arrested, as soon as you get in trouble for something, and now you want to be seen as the victim so you don't get in trouble, so you can go back to your life and keep doing what you were always doing, what you were raised to do. No. You need some serious deprogramming, some therapy, and you need to really get some help and do some work on yourself before I will look at you as a victim. As for Samuel Bateman and his male cronies over there running Short Creek like their own personal Epstein Island, like I said, put them in a cell, throw away the key, and light a match. Send them home to their God and let their day of reckoning come, because there is no court here on earth that can even attempt to understand the depravity and the evil that it takes to do this to children. And then to mask it behind religion and hope that that gives you protection for the horrible, illegal things you're doing, it's disgusting. I truly hope they burn in hell. And I hope that the young victims of Samuel Bateman and Maroney Johnson and the Bistline brothers and all of those idiots over there in Short Creek, I hope that their young victims can move forward from this and heal and find the light in this world that they were denied by every single person around them, probably since the day they were born. Very, very, very sad. But let me know what you think about all of this. If you haven't seen the Warren Jeffs FLDS documentary, I think it's still on Netflix. You should check it out. And before you go, make sure to like this video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter. The links and the handles are in the description box. Also in the description box, you can find a link to my podcast, Crime Weekly, that I co-host every single week with retired police detective Derek Levasseur. We have the podcast anywhere you get your audio podcasts. We also have a YouTube channel. So the audio podcast goes up on Friday, every Friday, and then the YouTube video will follow on Sunday. So go over and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because also every week we do something called Crime Weekly News, which is more current in the headlines cases. And it's definitely like a more discussion sort of format instead of just a structured like video format. So go check that out. Also check out my coffee company that Derek and I started. It's called Criminal Coffee Company. It's literally so good. It's criminal. I'm not kidding. It's a very, very good coffee. So check out the coffee. All the links that you need are in the description box. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, stay away from the FLDS church/cult. And I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Battle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. So you got to let it go. I got blood, blood on the strings. Blood, blood on the strings. Blood, blood on the strings. Being played so my face don't bleed. Got blood, blood on the strings. Blood, blood on the strings. Blood, blood on the strings. Lord knows it's been a rough week. Been channeling my son Harlowe.